Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge, a star invisible to the naked eye. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, Sirius scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the 1930s, French anthropologists Marcel Graeul and Germain Dieterlen spent years studying the Dogon people of Mali. They were told that the star Sirius had a companion, a tiny, incredibly dense star that orbited it every 50 years. They were told this star was invisible, but made Sirius wobble. Western astronomy had confirmed the existence of Sirius B in 1862, but how did the Dogon know? Robert Temple's 1976 book suggested the answer was extraterrestrial contact. The claim captured the world's imagination. But the follow-up investigation produced a very different picture. When anthropologist Walter Van Beek returned to the same Dogon villages in 1991 and interviewed over 40 informants, he found that most ordinary Dogon had no knowledge of Sirius mythology at all. Only elders who had direct personal contact with Graeul himself knew the story. The question is no longer how the Dogon knew about Sirius B. The question is whether they ever did, and what that means for how we evaluate claims about ancient astronomical knowledge. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological or archaeological contexts that predate their supposed invention, represent one of the most contentious categories in all of science. The scientific establishment's response to such discoveries has historically fallen into two MPS. The first is skeptical investigation, careful re-examination of the dating, the context, and the object itself, which often reveals a mundane explanation. The second, rarer response is acknowledgement, a formal revision of the assumed timeline in light of evidence that cannot be explained away. Both responses have legitimate roles. The history of archaeology includes many cases where enthusiastic amateur discoveries of supposedly ancient anomalies turned out to be forgeries, misidentified natural formations, or artifacts simply displaced from their original layer by post-depositional disturbance. Critical scrutiny of extraordinary claims is not closed-mindedness. It is scientific responsibility, but it must be applied consistently. The same rigorous scrutiny applied to anomalous claims must also be applied to the mainstream assumptions those claims challenge. And sometimes, when the evidence is examined honestly, the mainstream assumption is the one that breaks. The significance of genuine out-of-place artifacts goes beyond the objects themselves. Each one represents a data point in a larger argument about ancient human capability, about what our ancestors understood, what they could engineer, and how much of that knowledge DGE has been lost. The ancient world was not populated by primitive minds in primitive bodies. The brains that looked up at the night sky 40,000 years ago were neurologically identical to ours. Given sufficient time and motivation, they could have discovered and lost almost anything we know today. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter, the core evidence surrounding the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge. A star invisible to the naked eye is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Marcel Graillul conducted fieldwork among the Dogon people of Mali between 1931 and 1952, with Germain Dieterlen as a collaborator. Their findings about Dogon astronomy were published in French in 1965 in a work titled Le Renard Pale. The book described an elaborate Dogon cosmological system that included detailed knowledge of the Sirius star system, including the invisible companion star they called Po Tolo. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Sirius B is a white dwarf star confirmed by Western astronomy in 1862, when astronomer Alvan Clark first observed it visually using a newly built refracting telescope. Sirius B is not visible to the naked eye. It orbits Sirius in a period of approximately 50.09 years. The Dogon are reported to have described this 50-year orbital period and to have noted that the star, though invisible, was extremely heavy. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. White dwarf stars are among the densest forms of matter in the observable universe. Sirius B has a mass roughly equal to our Sun, compressed into a volume approximately the size of Earth. The Dogon description of Po Tolo as the heaviest star is physically accurate in a way that would be essentially impossible to arrive at through naked-eye astronomical observation of any known phenomenon. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Robert Temple published The Sirius Mystery in 1976, arguing that the Dogon's astronomical knowledge could only be explained by contact with extraterrestrial visitors from the Sirius system in ancient times. The book was an international bestseller and introduced the Sirius Mystery to a global audience, becoming one of the most influential works in the ancient astronaut genre. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of Temple's claims extended beyond Sirius B to include Dogon knowledge of Saturn's rings, Jupiter's 4 major moons, and other features of the solar system not visible to the naked eye. These additional claims are based on the same Graillul fieldwork and are subject to the same methodological concerns raised by subsequent investigators. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. French schools and Christian missions operated in Mali from the 1890s onward, decades before Graillul arrived. By the time of his fieldwork in the 1930s, Mali had been under French colonial administration for 40 years. European astronomical knowledge was available to educated Malians through schools, missionaries, and traders, providing a mundane potential explanation for how specific astronomical details could have entered Dogon oral culture before Grayayul recorded them. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge, a star invisible to the naked eye. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Robert Temple's extraterrestrial contact interpretation holds that the Dogon received their astronomical knowledge from ancient visitors from the Sirius system who physically arrived on Earth in the Ramat. He passed and transmitted scientific information to Dogon ancestors. Temple acknowledged the contamination problem in his book, but dismissed it. No Assyriologist, anthropologist, or astronomer with relevant expertise has endorsed this interpretation, and it has no independent supporting evidence. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that Marcel Grayayul unconsciously or consciously transmitted European astronomical knowledge to his Dogon informants during his decades of intensive fieldwork, producing contaminated data that he then reported as indigenous tea. Radition. This is Walter Van Beek's conclusion following his 1991 reinvestigation. Grayayul was a dominating intellectual personality who may have led witnesses through the framing of his questions, causing informants to build their answers around his expectations. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Dogon's Sirius knowledge was acquired from European missionaries, traders, or colonial administrators before Grayayul arrived, and was already a blend of indigenous astronomy and European scientific information by the time he recorded it. This contamination before fieldwork explanation is distinct from Grayayul actively introducing the information and would produce the same result in his field notes. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge, a star invisible to the naked eye, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Walter Van Beek's 1991 reinvestigation of the Dogon, published in Current Anthropology and considered devastating to the original Griaule account, found that when he interviewed more than 40 Dogon informants independently, most ordinary community members had no knowledge of the Sirius myth. Hology described in Le Renard Pale, only elder priests who had personally interacted with Griaule during his original fieldwork were able to reproduce the story, a pattern consistent with Griaule as the source of the information rather than its recorder. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. Carl Sagan examined the Sirius mystery claims in his 1979 book, Broca's Brain, and identified the contamination problem as the central methodological flaw. Sagan noted that Griaule's intensive years of contact with Dogon informants, combined with his prior knowledge of European astronomy, created ideal conditions for the inadvertent transfer of astronomical information from researcher to subject, a problem endemic to long-term ethnographic fieldwork. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the broader Dogon astronomical tradition based purely on naked eye observation is sophisticated and genuine, encompassing careful observation of stellar rising times, planetary movements, and lunar cycles. This authentic tradition is distinct from the specific Sirius B claims and does not require any anomalous explanation. Temple's book conflated the genuine Dogon astronomical tradition with the contested Sirius B material in ways that made critical evaluation more difficult. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge, a star invisible to the naked eye. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Van Beek's 1991 article in Current Anthropology is the standard academic reference on the Sirius mystery and is considered to have effectively resolved the question within anthropology. The academic consensus is methodological error and probable contamination in Griaule's original fieldwork. Temple's alien contact interpretation has no independent support. and is not endorsed by any relevant academic discipline. The episode has become a standard case study in anthropological methodology, specifically in the dangers of researcher influence on fieldwork subjects and the importance of independent verification. Current Dogon scholarship avoids the Sirius controversy and focuses on the community's well-documented and genuinely impressive naked-eye astronomical traditions. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Dogon tribe's Sirius B knowledge, a star invisible to the naked eye, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Dogon tribe ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.